Agriculture, a sacred task, and a fundamental prerequisite to industrial and other developments. Hi, I'm Kwesi, Biosystem Agronomy Engineer, here with you today, welcoming you to the Farm Smarter Show, where we discuss issues about food and nutrition security and sustainability of agriculture production systems. Let's get into it. So today we'll be looking at the idea of agrochemicals, the use of agrochemicals in production systems. Historically, many agrochemicals, especially pesticides, were used at the time in the early World Wars. And after the World Wars, they were redirected into the use in agriculture. And then you had what we call the Green Revolution. Green Revolutionary system of agriculture depended heavily on agricultural chemicals, agricultural machines, which after a certain period of time were founded to be unsustainable, many of the practices, due to their effects on the environment. So my problems with agrochemicals include that first, they're not readily available in many of our areas where we live. Many of the tropical countries, we do not produce them. So the efficacy of them is not only depends on the results we get in the field, but as well the economic and financial and capitalistic nature of the business environment within which they were created. These influence decisions, these drive marketing campaigns, which help us to think that the things that are good for us are not really good, and vice versa. So some of the problems include as well that many agrochemicals that are available in tropical countries are banned in their own countries, or they are banned in many countries, but we often turn a blind eye to that. There must be some red flags raised when you hear these chemicals are banned. My next problem with this is the possibility of bioaccumulation in a system. And what by bioaccumulation, what I mean here is that the chemical over time accumulates in minimum amounts, accumulates in a system up to a point where it starts to show effects. And these effects at the end of the tunnel results in health problems for the human beings, right? The effect on biodiversity is another big problem, right? So because when we apply these chemicals, oftentimes they affect major pollinators. The bee, Apis mellifera, is one of the main ones. Many predators of pests, and many in the soil, flora and fauna, the biodiversity of the soil, which tends to have an effect on the productivity of an agricultural system. An agricultural system will almost cease to be productive if not propped up by agrochemicals in the long run. So that makes us dependent on the suppliers of these chemicals and chiching for them. So when you watch the level of management that you in an agricultural system actually have when using agrochemicals, that depends on the level of complexity that you can deal with. Most farmers are not as complex and can handle them all the time. So they tend to use agrochemicals too frequently and without the appropriate personal protective clothing. Right? So today we're going to look at what does an integrated pest management system look like. Okay. I like to break integrated pest and disease management in 3 steps. The first step is the preventive measures. So in preventive measures, these are measures that are taken to prevent the incidence of any selected pest and disease. So how we start with preventive, after we have determined the crops that we're going to produce, then we identify the main pests and disease that affect these crops, right? The damage pattern, the population dynamics, which is how do the populations grow and shrink as the year passes in relation to environmental or climatic variation, right? So this will give us an idea as to when in the year you have the largest amounts of these populations and what are the elements or the factors that support the population growth or decline of a single pest or an agent of disease, right? We have to also consider the morphology and the ecology of both the plant, the animal that is affected, but as well the microorganism, the causative agent of the disease or the pest. So by knowing the morphology, we could know at what stage in the life cycle that they seem to be most vulnerable that you can control them, right? By knowing the ecology, you know what are the environmental factors that are necessary so that they may thrive. And then by knowing that now, you could probably manipulate that, okay? So after that, we think of what are repellent crops. What are some crops that can repel pests and disease? What are some crops that will attract them? So we could use a variation of these crops, attractant crops and repellent crops, right, to keep the pest in one place or to repel them altogether. Another thing is good nutrition, good soil nutrition, because a healthy plant can withstand better the effects of pests and disease, right? So proper watering, proper cultural practices, proper field sanitation, that your seeds are not diseased, all these are cultural practices. I even know of practices where farmers themselves, right? Farmers plant at a phase of the moon, which we call black, but it's the new moon. And at the phase of the new moon, they say that the pests, nocturnal pests, are not able to see where they plant their seed, right, in the nighttime. And honestly, that works for them, right? So there's many things from traditional knowledge that we can fit into agriculture. Because when we break down the semantics of the word, agriculture is to agree with the culture. So you have to be in sync with the environment when you're taking your measures of control. So under preventive measures, there's also the trap plants, the yellow sticky traps. There's so many others that we can do. Even the cultivation, because some pests pass some stage of their life cycle in the soil. So in properly handling preventive measures, among others, those I have mentioned, after this now, the next step we come to is what I call monitoring of your pests and your disease. So now that you have identified the major pests and diseases, right? Now you will and the damage patterns that they have, now you will start a scouting program. So instead of a systematic application of pesticides, you would have a systematic set or a systematic action of establishing a scouting program. So when you do a scouting program over time, that you select a portion of crops from your field, a number of crops, a number of the same type of crop from various parts, small pockets, some sample populations we call them, a small number, and every now and then when you scout, you pass and you check out these plants, whether you have 10 groups of 10 in a zigzag formation in your field, you pass out and you check these crops. And if 7 out of 10 of these crops are affected with the certain damage pattern, then you know, right, now it's time to apply your curative measure. So what you do here, you set what we call a threshold. And you set this threshold of, hey, about 25%. Once you have an idea that 25% of your field is affected, then you can proceed with curative measures. So curative measures can be both mechanical, cultural, and for the application of pesticides. So in terms of mechanical is basically removing it off. But if you're in much larger holdings and you already reach a threshold, your biggest thinking might be to apply agrochemicals. So the application of agrochemicals, when you apply them now, you have to consider a lot. Sometimes the type of agrochemical, because there are organic chemicals that are environmentally friendly that you can use that can achieve the same results. So my first bet would be to go there, because you don't want to upset your pollinators. You don't want to stop your fruit set, right? You don't want to upset microorganisms, beneficial microorganisms, and beneficial macroorganisms in the soil. as well as you do not want to try to control the populations of predators of the pests that you're looking at, right? So in solving this whole problem is like a cultural problem. A cultural problem. We need to bring back these traditional measures with these integrated pest management measures so that farmers in all regions will have access to the control of pests and diseases in their field through the application of this. And this can be applied in any crop. It's just do the background research and prepare yourself well. All right. So glad to have had you here today to discuss agrochemicals, especially in the area of pesticides. And we did, to recap, we pointed out the problems with agrochemicals in terms of accessibility, in terms of understanding of the agrochemicals, in terms of the use, the pesticide use, PPE, personal protective wear, and wearing them all the time. Even in terms of the frequency, when should a farmer apply agrochemicals or agropesticides, when and how frequent, and what are the indicators which indicate to you when you should apply a curative measure as a pesticide. These pesticides are curative measures, all right? And to give an example, paraquat is one pesticide that has been banned in 42 countries. Yet still in our countries, paraquat is being used. We don't manufacture them, right? They upset our biodiversity, right? They upset our cost of production because applying chemicals systematically over time, you're applying when you have no pests. That means you are wasting money. You are costing financial money to yourself. You are costing economic value to yourself, because in the longer run, you're not going to be able to work through due to bioaccumulation, environmental degradation, killing of species, that beneficial species that may actually help your system. So in all that to say, I'm favorable of organic agriculture, but at the same time, if you must use a chemical, use it wisely. Look for indicators before you use them. Thanks. So even in the 20th century, with faith, courage, and a just cause, David shall still beat Goliath. Food security with their part. Blessings.